So, here we go again. This is Nietzsche's Greatest Weight by Aaron Ridley out of the Journal of Nietzsche Studies from 1997. This is a requested paper from Aristotle, as always. Feel free to ask questions along the way. If you're on a Twitch or Kick, you can do it live. Later, for everyone on YouTube, hi, but I didn't stream this one to YouTube. So, you can get the links below. Okay, so here we go. Let's go. Nietzsche's Greatest Weight. One of Nietzsche's best-known thoughts, the thought of eternal recurrence, figures largest in the gay science in Zarathustra. It then drops out for Beyond Good and Evil, the Genealogy, Twilight, and the Antichrist before reappearing in Ecce Homo, where he still seems quite attached to it. The best-known statement of it is in the section of the gay science called The Greatest Weight. What if someday or night a demon were to... Oh, are you on like a demon theme here today? Is this just like a Halloween episode, Aristotle? What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you in your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence, even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. It is a Halloween thing. I suspected as much. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it a speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine? If this thought gained possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps perhaps crush you. The question in each and everything, do you desire this once more and innumerable times more, would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight. Or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate confirmation and seal? Butt spider, yes. I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier, butt spiders. I mean, maybe Aris had this all planned out. I wouldn't even put it past him to have the spiders coming out of your butt as like a horror thing. Okay, so that was Nietzsche in the Gay Science, 341. It is clear that the thought of eternal recurrence is being proposed as a test of some kind, a thought experiment which will somehow sort the sheep from the goats. And I guess that would be goats would be the greatest of all times in this case. Butt spiders are to the credit of the Good Place TV show. I did not know that. That's amazing. Good for them. It is not being offered as a cosmological hypothesis about the nature of the universe. Nietzsche did toy with the eternal recurrence as a physical theory in his notebooks, but wisely chose not to enter it under that aspect in any of his published works. So the thought of eternal recurrence is a thought experiment designed to test something. And one passes the test, it seems, if one can experience the thought as maximally welcome. One fails if one falls to the floor and starts gnashing one's teeth. Yeah, so it's like if you think that your life, the way you live it, is good and you'd keep doing it forever as you are, then you win. And you'd be like, wow, this sucks. If I have to keep doing this over and over, then you lost the cosmic gamble there. The context of the test is set chiefly by Nietzsche, even better known declaration in section 125 of the Gay Science called The Madman. The declaration of the death of God. God for Nietzsche means not just the Christian God, but the transcendental entities and interpretation of all kinds. Thus, Plato's forms are filed under God, Kant's nominal realm, and things in themselves are filed there, as well as all the more obviously otherworldly fantasies that we call religions. Anything, in fact, that is committed to the denial of, as he puts it in the genealogy, quote, the whole sphere of becoming and transitoriness, end quote. In the penultimate section of Ecce Homo, Nietzsche gives an impressively concise summary of his quarrel with God. Quote, the concept of God invented as a counter-concept of life. Everything harmful, poisonous, slanderous, the whole hostility unto death against life synthesized in the concept of a gruesome unity, the concept of the beyond, the true world invented in order to devaluate the only world there is, in order to retain no goal, no reason, no task for our earthly reality. The concept of soul, the spirit, finally even immortal soul, invented in order to despise the body, to make it sick, holy, to make it sick, holy. to oppose with a ghastly levity everything that deserves to be taken seriously in life. End quote. If God then stands for the evacuation of value from this world into some other non-existent fantasy world, then the death of God marks the demise of transcendental fantasies, and with it, the opportunity, indeed the necessity, of celebrating life, of learning how to value this world, the only world there is, that is, of learning how to value transience, contingency, embodiment, and all the other facts about living imminently that God has acted as a counter-concept to. If some such way of valuing cannot be found, Nietzsche suggests we are doomed to nihilism. Man, Aristotle says, Nietzsche is so cheesy, but I love him. Yeah, this is the old, existentialism. It's like, oh man, what are you doing? You have to really do something. Was Nietzsche just emo? Seriously, this is now I'm thinking about it. Is Nietzsche emo? Was that it? Is he just over the top? Who am I? What am I doing here? That's why kids like him. He's emo. That's the problem. Yeah. Okay. Now I understand better. That's why he's talking about sick and holy. He's just overly dramatic. Fine. Yeah. Okay. The thought of eternal recurrence is supposed pretty clearly to lack. I can't speak anymore. The thought of eternal recurrence is supposed pretty clearly to supply the lack, or rather is supposed to be some sort of test of how well one has learned to value life, the world, and so on, without slipping into transcendental fantasies. If one can say yes to the demon, Nietzsche seems to want to say, then one would indeed have succeeded in becoming well disposed to oneself and to life. If one answers the demon no, on the other hand, then one must take refuge in God or else destroy oneself. Haven't I finished a book of his? Not in a million years. That's the problem, Tindarios. It's I feel like I should know Nietzsche better, but I really have not spent any time with him in a very long time, since basically I was in college. So it's ancient history in my head. So yeah, maybe I knew he was emo, but I had forgotten. He's got some good short books. Maybe I'd have to go back. It was interesting. Someone was claiming to be a Nietzsche scholar, I think, when I was streaming to YouTube last week, and I was like, maybe, I was like, good on you. I don't know. He was saying, Nietzsche was saying these things. I was like, I don't know. I haven't read Nietzsche in years. So this is one of the things. The stuff I do is not always the most accessible. I feel like sometimes I got to do some more accessible philosophy. And I like Nietzsche. I think it's good stuff quite often. So maybe I should go spend some more time reading that. And at least then I can have more things to talk about with people. Okay. So yeah, so if you answer yes to the demon, good. If you answer no to the demon, bad. Or so at least Nietzsche says. There is no doubt that the rhetorical effect of the passage is sufficiently powerful to make one almost believe him. One can almost feel oneself being torn between the yes and the no as one reads it. But then, when one sits back and reflects, things begin to look rather different. Indeed, on reflection, it seems clear that the test he proposes simply couldn't be worth taking. The only proper response to the demon, surely, is a shrug of the shoulders. If my life is to be repeated infinitely in all its detail, then those details include my ignorance of the fact that my life is to be repeated infinitely. I can't, as it were, smuggle memories from one cycle to the next. And if the demon is coming to me now, he has presumably also been to me at precisely the same point in my life innumerable times before. And what difference has that made? If I passed the test, I passed. If I failed, I failed. And I'll go on doing whichever I did infinitely many times more without it changing a thing. The thought of eternal recurrence, then, should be a matter of the deepest indifference. Why care? I don't know if that's fair, because it hasn't mattered up until your point at this point, up to the point the demon comes up to you. It may ruin the rest of your life to think that this is all I will ever have and it's terrible. If you're having a good life, then you may live the rest of your life even better. So it may not even be so much of an experiment, but an intervention of the demon to either help or hurt the rest of how the rest of your life goes. So yeah, if you didn't know and you were just sort of waking up every day and it was the same shit over and over, it's okay, you didn't know. But if you have to keep going on with the knowledge, it will do something to you. It will have an effect. It will influence the way you behave. And so this is an existential question. What do you do given this knowledge? Unreal Ryan says, it seems like most people who write on Nietzsche these days are postmodern continentals whose writings are a mess. In like the 60s and 70s, he was big with the existentialist crowd. Whereas to me, the right perspective on his coruscating is his coruscating naturalism. Leiter goes way too far in trying to turn him into an analytic philosopher, though. Yeah, I don't know. I only know Leiter mostly from the blog, but yeah. There's always a contingent of people who try to analytize like these sort of continental philosophers. You can't do it completely, but like you can get some things out of it. Like power washing a Chromebook, yeah. This paragraph was your first thought. Okay, yeah. Okay, so why care? This difficulty with Nietzsche's thought experiment has to be very widely noticed, and all sorts of attempts have been made to tweak it into something that makes sense, including, desperately enough, the suggestion that Nietzsche's test can only be understood properly when one read carelessly, so that one construes it as meaning the eternal recurrence of the same, only slightly different. None of these attempts have been at all successful in my view, and I won't be trying to add to their number here. Since Semiax looked up for me, for all, coruscate is the sparking off. Thank you. I've seen the word. I did not remember what the hell it was. Unreal says, I think pragmatists would find more affinity in him than they think they would. Oh, I agree. When I was younger, I was like I was kind of pragmatic, and I thought Nietzsche was pretty close. So that's fair. See, I don't remember what I thought. I remember thinking that, though. Severely critical, scathing, yeah. Okay. Sure. Coruscating naturalism. Okay. What I want to do instead is to try to understand why, despite the obviousness of the deficiency which his rhetoric at first conceals, Nietzsche thought the eternal recurrence worth having in the first place. What sort of job was it meant to do? What sort of gap was it meant to fill? If we can answer those questions, I suggest we'll arrive at a better understanding of what Nietzsche's great weight really was. Alright, so eternal recurrence, as we have seen, is a thought that arises for Nietzsche in the context of the death of God, and for present purposes, it is best approached in the context of the death of a specifically Christian God. Christianity, Nietzsche tells us in the genealogy, gave man a meaning. The only meaning offered so far, man was saved, thereby he could now will something. No matter at first to what end, why with what he willed, the will itself was saved. End quote. The will, says Nietzsche, because Christianity offered a meaning for human existence. You're currently fallen, but do well enough and eternal bliss is yours. It gave at the same time a reason for taking one's decisions seriously, for taking seriously one's interventions into one's own life. It made it matter, and matter very much, what you willed to do. But with the death of God, that goes. It becomes an open question whether it matters at all what you will do, and if with the departure of God, the meaning and therefore the value of life departs too. It becomes an open question whether life is worth living, whether one ought not to become a nihilist. So the death of God leaves a massive vacuum behind it, a vacuum expressed in Nietzsche's anxiety about the role or fate henceforth of the will. Why now does it matter what I decide to do and I aim for? Yeah, this is stock interpretation of Nietzsche, though. Basically, once you lose the God-given meaning in your life, what do we do? If there's no gods, no masters, how do we actually have meaning for our lives? And so, like, that's normal, though. Okay. Considered temporally, the death of God leaves three interrelated gaps unplugged: the meaning of the future, the meaning of the past, and the meaning above all of the present. For the Christian, the future is the site of infinite hope. After death, he can hope to enjoy eternal bliss, and this future is the object of all his strivings. The past, on the other hand, where the sins that he has committed currently languish, will, if he is saved, be wiped clean. God or Jesus will forgive him, and his past will, in effect, have been erased. This attitude to the past as erasable in a future of infinite hope lends to the Christian's present the greatest possible significance. What he decides to do now may influence decisively his prospects of future salvation. Moreover, what he decides to do now is not only destined to become a part of his potentially erasable past, but is also, if he decides well and so improves his chances of securing an infinitely desirable future, a contribution to the future erasure of whatever there is in his past to lament or regret. The Christian's present, then, because it works on both the past and the future, is a limitlessly meaningful site of potentially redemptive action. Yeah, I mean, this is the whole point of what can you do now? The linchpin in all of this, plainly enough, is the Christian's infinitely meaningful future. Take that away, and the prospect of erasing the past disappears. And in the absence of an all-redeeming future to aim for, the present, too, is deprived of its redemptive significance. The death of God, of transcendental future promise, seems to rob existence of its meaning and point, most decisively, in robbing the present. And we do, after all, live in the present, of its gravity. Why now does it matter what I decide to do? What is the meaning of my will? Like, what's it all matter? Like, if there's no one, like, keeping a karma score, what does it matter? That's all it is. I mean, again, I think, the Heideggerian, well, I wonder if they're going to do the Heideggerian view, because, I mean, granted, Heidegger was talking about stuff like this in the 30s, but I don't see this paper going that way, so I'm kind of interested to know where it's going, but I don't know if anything's been said yet. What's the matter, you? Exactly. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And this, of course, is what Nietzsche takes to be his problem. He wants to invest time, the dimension within which the will has its being, with an immanent significance, with a non-transcendental meaning. He wants to make the present matter again. Indeed, his problem, as Milan Kundera puts it, is quite literally the unbearable lightness of being in the present, of living without transcendental guarantees. Remember what Nietzsche claims, that the thought of eternal recurrence should lie upon your actions as the greatest weight, that the thought of eternal recurrence, in other words, should operate as a non-transcendental replacement for Christianity, which non-transcendentally will make the present heavy with the significance now as the present was heavy with the significance for the Christian. So how are the actual mechanics of the eternal recurrence supposed to be able to do this? So, all right. So the thought is that what gives meaning to the now is that we are doing this over and over and over again. And so we have a choice in the now of what we're doing. Okay. The present, one imagines, is meant to acquire weight through pure repetition. What happens once I am losing it today. The present, one imagines, is meant to acquire weight through pure repetition. What happens once only is unique, singular. Its significance is exhausted in its happening, and it goes off to join the past. Frank says, imagine thinking that it matters whether your actions don't matter. Well, I mean, that's the point. That's exactly the point. What do you do at that point? And Nietzsche is saying, well, it matters because, you're gonna do this a billion times, and so that's why it matters. If the present can be made to happen infinitely often, by contrast, its pure character as happening is never over and done with, and so its significance is, in that sense, never exhausted. The significance of what I will now, that is never quite worked through. If things happen only once, they are over once and for all, they go on and join the past. And the past, of course, is beyond the influence of my will entirely. Nietzsche's unhappiness with this state of affairs is expressed forcefully in Zarathustra. Quote, truly, my friends, I walk among men as among the fragments and limbs of men. The terrible thing to my eyes is to find men shattered in pieces as if over a battlefield of slaughter. And when my eye flees from the present to the past, it always discovers the same thing, fragments and limbs and dreadful chances, but no men. The present and past upon the earth, alas, my friends, that is my most intolerable burden, to redeem the past and to transform every it was into I wanted it thus. That alone I do call redemption. That is what the will's teeth gnashing and most lonely affliction is called. Powerless against that which has been done, the will is an angry spectator of all things past. The will cannot will backwards, that it cannot break time and time's desire, that is the will's most lonely affliction. It is sullenly wrathful that time does not run back, that which was. That is what the stone which cannot roll away is called. End quote. The past, then, is a great weight, a stone which, because it eludes the influence of the will, is incapable of lending the will significance. The Christian's past wasn't like this. Its weight could be shifted by acting now in such a way as to secure the future erasure of all that has been. So how to make the past again subject to the will? Eternal recurrence, thinks Nietzsche, because the demon asks you to affirm everything, past as well as present. You are, as it were, being given a second bite at the cherry. The past was once present and was fleeting but meaninglessly available to the will then. But in suggesting that the past may unfold again infinitely often in the future, and in inviting you say, yes, I want it thus, that is, yes, I'd like it again, and yes, I'd like exactly those things again, you seem in effect to be given the opportunity to will backwards, that is, to exercise your will on the future recurrence of the past. You can't actually change anything in the past, you can't roll away the stone, but you can at least bring the stone on board as something you have chosen. Yeah, kind of, but isn't that the point of what this author was criticizing the people earlier for? You're not actually changing anything in the past or in the future on any eternal recurrence. It's exactly the same. And so you won't know that you're doing anything different. You won't know anything different. It's going to be exactly the same. So even though it has significance in the now, the fact that it is in the past means that happening again in the future, it is just as fixed. There's complete fixity of all these things. And so how does that give it any significance? Just because it's happening again and there's like the infinite of them, that doesn't make it like it only has the fact. I don't like this. It sounds like basically you have meaning in the now, that you have a choice, and at every point it's a now, but then that doesn't make the past. It means that you have a lot of nows that happen over and over. Aristotle says, does it sound kind of stoic, and does that make it a bootlicker of present circumstances, or a sour grapes adapting of our mind to our current circumstances? Good question. Well, it's not sour grapes because it's forcing a choice. And so you're not adapting it to the current circumstances because you have the option to say yes or no. And so you could say, yeah, it's great, or you could say, no, it's terrible. And so you're not sour grapesing it. So I think it's more of the bootlicking stoicism. Because you're supposed to accept everything as having meaning and adjust your opinion to it. And you're supposed to say, oh yeah, I'm going to I'll be okay with it then. So yeah, I'm thinking it's more stoic than sour grapesy. Systematic says, the idea here is that the artifacts that we leave behind are evidence that we existed before. It doesn't really matter if it's a literal reincarnation or not. What he's saying is Zarathustra. Well, if it's not literal, then what is the eternal recurrence? I thought this author was keeping it as literal as possible. So, like, the eternal recurrence is exactly the same recurrence. So I thought this was. All right. Ivan says it reminds me of the depiction of hell in the series Lucifer. I wonder if this argument might work in block time. That's an interesting question. I wouldn't be surprised if someone adapted Nietzsche to the different time theories, just because it seems like something someone would do, but yeah. It does seem to have a touch of slave morality that Nietzsche was so against. That's the idea. Zarathustra is as Ubermensch. Yeah. So it's like Nietzsche wants to say that, like, you have to be like, yes, this is good. But again, is that just is that like impossible? Like, why would you think that everything is perfect just the way it is? Like, it seems weird. Yeah, Thus Spake Zarathustra is a fictional novel, yeah. But I guess the question, going back to Aris, is like, how are we supposed to adapt to understanding this sort of question? We just like, do we have to adapt to this to our like sour grapesian, or is it like, you should overcome any of the current things, and like then you'll see the world aright at that point, and then you'll just like it. But I'm getting this sort of I'm not sure exactly what your point is, since I'm so I'm sorry if I'm misinterpreting you. But yeah. Aris says, Yeah, at the individual existential level, it's important to ask if you can affirm the values you're living by at any moment. In a political way, too much of that can lead to a tolerance of injustice. Yeah, and so that's kind of, I think Nietzsche was definitely focused on the individual level, but what's the value here then? Isn't he just saying if you lived your life well, you would be okay with recurrence, so live it well? Yeah, I think that's Ivan, I think that is his ultimate point, is that it's supposed to be uplifting, to do, as Cinesemiotics was, to do the Ubermensch thing, is to live your life the way you want to, and raise yourself up. So yeah, Aristotle, does this make the eternal recurrence not sound very impressive? So maybe that's actually a criticism of this reading of the eternal recurrence, Aris, because it seems like in the end it's like, all right, just adapt yourself and like you'll feel better if you're a Stoic. It's like, well, that's not a great point on Nietzsche. So maybe this is a bad take on what Nietzsche was saying, or Nietzsche was saying something dumb. No Ubermensch in a person. Yeah, see, this is my problem. I fail at Nietzsche. Ubermensch is like, well, this is the idea I thought was that you're supposed to, overcome. Yeah, it's the collective human. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, that sounds correct. But, yeah, I think the idea is that you're supposed to, will yourself up. And so, like, people are supposed to raise up, be better people in some sense. All right, let's see. Let's keep going and see what else we have from this author. Okay. So they're trying to give meaning to the past. The way they're doing that is, since it happens over and over and over again, the past is also the future. The problem here is that basically you're blurring the past and the future, especially since it's infinite. There is no past and future. It just happens to be a now. And that's all we have. Since we're doing it infinitely again, the future infinitely again, the past, there's no difference between the two. So that's a problem. So this is starting to get shaky on the theory of time here, because like, yeah, if everything's infinite, you're gonna have problems defining past and future. There's only the relative to where you are at the moment, and this is getting into a Heideggerian interpretation anyway. Yeah, I'm not sure if this author can maintain the realism of time in this interpretation of Nietzsche. Aristotle says, yeah, that backwards willing seems like an academic trick. Yeah, and so this is the issue, is like they're fudging their theory of time, which is not great. But maybe that's what Nietzsche was up to, but it seems it is a fudge. Okay. So, and then now we're going to do the future. That covers the present and the past. The future is now easy. First, since the future will one day be present, it can be seen as prospectively weighty now, since it, like every present, is destined to have a significance which can never be finally exhausted. And second, because the future, having been present, will become past, it is, as prospectively past, brought permanently within the ambit of the will, as something which you can decide now to say yes to choose. And of course, the capacity thus to bring both future and past within the ambit of the will now has precisely the sort of significance to the present which the Christian had enjoyed before the death of God. How much significance? Well, it depends presumably on how much recurrence there is. The Christian's kind of significance was infinite, so better make the recurrence infinite too. Better, in fact, make it eternal. Frank says, this feels like a really weak understanding of infinities. Yeah, so I'm getting that this is not doing a charitable reading of Nietzsche. This is not maybe the most charitable way of reading it. Maybe it is a textually accurate way, but I think that there are better interpretations out there that may be also textually accurate and may understand things, give better results, or make this more of a clever thing, because this is looking like it's a little bit shaky at this point. Yeah, see, Ivan says you multiply the present times infinity, then you lose past and future. Everything's just a very hazy now, and like you don't know where the now is. It's just one of these times at all that could be at any point in the timeline, and that gives it infinite weight. It's like, okay, yes, like now should matter, but like this just seems like a, yeah, as people are saying, just sort of a mathematical trick. Okay, so Zarathustra is not the Ubermensch, but rather a teacher prophet guiding the way. While he has some qualities in favor, he is not perfect. Okay, good to know. Frank says, but adding the loop isn't multiplying by infinity, it's adding a whole extra factor of infinity. If your life was infinitesimal in the face of eternity before the looping, it's still infinitesimal. Yeah, so, again, this was not meant to be formal. This is meant to be like, okay, you do exist for some period, and that's going to happen infinitely. So even though it's infinitesimal, it might be very small. I don't think it's meant to be infinitesimal. I think it's meant to be of at least significance to you. And so then you're multiplying that by infinity. So it's not, I don't think it's meant to go to zero. Okay, here's what, continuing. So eternal recurrence, although incoherent for the reasons I've mentioned, seems quite explicitly to be Nietzsche's attempt to invent a non-transcendental successor to Christianity, something which will do pretty much the same job as Christianity, and will even do it in a something like the same way. That is, through the redemption of the present via weight. Okay, so this is basically saying that Nietzsche is recapitulating the Christian theology, and I don't know if that's what Nietzsche really wanted to do. So maybe that this is a problem here, just in the general scheme of what Nietzsche was up to. Frank says, if it's of significance to you, you don't need the looping. It's already significant to you. No, because what Nietzsche was saying was that it's of incredible lightness. Of course, you want your life to have significance, but what exactly is that? The problem was with God removed, you didn't have meaning anymore. But of course, it's your life, and you want to, do something with it. So I think that would be you're trying to find a way. The author here is trying to find a way to apply meaning to your life. Of course, it means something to you. You just don't know how to apply it. You get to nihilism if you don't have anything. But that still matters to you. So I think the author isn't wrong, at least about that. Andre O'Brien says that would be a plot twist I didn't really buy. Yeah, that's why I'm afraid this is kind of straw manning Nietzsche. It's like, I don't think that's what he was up to, or maybe just a bad take. Okay, and as a test, it appears to be a test of whether or not one has managed to avoid nihilism. A test, in other words, to allow one to prove that one isn't or isn't about to become a nihilist or a Christian recidivist. Cincinnati says he was restoring paganism, Zoroastrian, which had been subsumed by Abrahamic religions. Something like that. I think that was part of it, yeah. But the question arises, regardless of the coherence or otherwise of eternal recurrence as a test, is it the sort of thing that Nietzsche, given his other commitments, had any business to be cooking up? Has it any real place in his thought? In Ecce Homo, Nietzsche hails himself as the thinker of eternal recurrence, but he also wants to run that thought together with two other staple themes of his. Quote, my formula for greatness in human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. And secondly, I have the right to understand myself as the first tragic philosopher. Before me, tragic wisdom was lacking. Even among the great Greeks in philosophy, I retained some doubt in the case of Heraclitus. The doctrine of the eternal recurrence might, in the end, have been taught already by him. So we do have our Heraclitus quote here in chat. And we get a good quote from that. Corpses are more fit to be thrown out than dung. So he has other thoughts. So Nietzsche apparently sees eternal recurrence as part of the same parcel that includes the love of fate and the sort of wisdom he calls tragic. I want now to explain why he was wrong, why indeed the thought of eternal recurrence undermines and cheapens the insights encompassed by the other two. Yeah, and see, this is interesting. This is the sort of thing you got to be very wary of. Nietzsche is a great philosopher. If you think that you are going to be like, Nietzsche, you're wrong, and this is why, maybe you have some point. Chances are you're the one that's wrong, though. It's like, no, Nietzsche didn't fuck this up that bad, especially in a short paper like this. What's the meaning here? I think the author has missed the point, or just everyone has missed Nietzsche's point, and that's unlikely also. Okay, take amor fati, the love of fate. What does that actually come to? Nietzsche's most eloquent expression of it appears in the section of the Gay Science called For the New Year. Quote, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who make things beautiful. Amor fati. Let that be my love henceforth. I do not want to wage war against what is ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not even want to accuse those who accuse. Looking away shall be my only negation. And all in all, and on the whole, someday I wish to be only a yes sayer. End quote. The fact that Nietzsche never did give up waging war against what is ugly, nor ever exhibited much of a gift for looking away, doesn't undermine the force of what he says here. To love fate is to say yes to even the most unpalatable necessities of existence. It is, in effect, to have become well disposed to oneself and to life. But like they say, you're going to look away, so you're not going to say yes to even the most unpalatable necessities. Jawohl, Mensch, yes. So like this just seems weird. This seems like it's cherry picking the sentence out of this passage that the author wants to say. I'm just not sure about it. It's like Nietzsche says, "Looking away shall be my only negation," and so nor ever exhibited much of a gift for looking away. Nietzsche's failure is not like his personal failure that he ever exhibited a gift for looking away does not make what his philosophy says incorrect. It may be a personal failing of Nietzsche that he couldn't follow his philosophy, but that would be a personal failing. And so the fact that this author is taking something that Nietzsche did himself as a counterexample to his philosophy might make him a hypocrite, but that doesn't make him wrong. And it's hard to read into that at this point. So it's just weird. Like, why would you read into, maybe the author being a hypocrite says you can't do it, fine, but then saying, well, no, he didn't mean it is a very different thing. Okay. The context within which amor fati becomes a desirable attitude is again provided by the death of God. Transcendental consolations are no longer possible. What is ugly can no longer be explained away as merely pertaining to an illusory world of temporality, embodiment, contingency, for with the death of God, that world is revealed as the only world there is. Thus, to love fate is to say yes to everything that God has been invented as the counter concept to temporality, to embodiment, to a contingency, to every necessity of life lived without transcendence. And to grasp the character of that life, the character of what is said to be said yes to, is to grasp Nietzsche's tragic wisdom. In the section of Human All Too Human called Fundamental Insight, he gives a succinct summary. There is no pre-established harmony between the furtherance of truth and the well-being of mankind. Adam Fighter, what's up? Which is to say, the truth about existence may be very ugly indeed. The facts about life may not square at all with what in our heart of hearts we dearly love to be the case. So life may be, in that sense, fundamentally and ineliminably tragic. What sort of facts might be at issue here? Yeah, okay. Chat's chatting. The answer essentially is facts about human embodiment, contingency, and temporality. For example, death is final, death is inevitable, the future is limitlessly open, the vastness of the future infinitely surpasses the scope of any finite will, the past is a dead weight about which nothing can be done, the present and future are destined to become past. The will cannot break time and time's desire, what is past is done with, and the pastness of the past is limitlessly voracious. These and similar appear to be inescapable truths about non-transcendental living, ugly truths whose inescapability is in striking disharmony with all that we might want for ourselves, with all that human well-being might demand, a disharmony pre-established by the death of God. And it is to facts such as these that the lover of fate is supposed to be able to say yes, is supposed to be able to find beautiful and to make beautiful. Again, this is weird because it seems like Nietzsche was open to the choice, but this person's saying, well, no, you don't actually have a choice. You have to accept everything the way it is. Again, this is making it seem like you don't have any choice in life. You just have to say yes to the way the world is. But again, You don't wage war against one another. You do not want to accuse. You don't even want to accuse. Because looking away, that says you are at least changing yourself. Again, this is the stoic thing. You are going to look away from what is ugly. You're not going to accuse. You're not going to be like, you're not going to wage war against it. You're going to change yourself, which is the sort of stoic line that Aristotle was saying. Sounds stoic to access world as is. Yeah, this interpretation of Nietzsche, I think, is very stoic and probably just wrong in that case. It seems weird. This is not how Nietzsche is normally interpreted. That doesn't make this author wrong. It just makes the author outside of the mainstream interpretation. Okay. So, amor fati and tragic wisdom are intimately connected in Nietzsche's thought, then, and indeed represent one of his very deepest currents. How, in fact, to come to terms with the whole sphere of becoming and transitoriness. Yeah, see, this is so weird, because this author is saying like that the world is fixed and determinate, and then the whole world of sphere of becoming and transitoriness seems like that's not how Nietzsche was describing his world. It just doesn't seem like this is how Nietzsche said it, and then this sort of fixedness of the past and the future is just not how Nietzsche saw things. Okay, to deny or evade the problem, to refuse to face up to the ineliminable, time-bound, and hence tragic character of existence, is to misrepresent oneself the kind of fate of which one is to become a lover. As Milan Kundera puts it, again in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, evasion of the problem constitutes a denial of shit, a denial of whatever one finds unacceptable in existence, and Kundera's name for such denial is kitsch. What now of eternal recurrence? Well, if I am right that the eternal recurrence is Nietzsche's attempt to reinvent Christian's relation to the present, as not merely the junction of past and future, but as the site of decisive action on both, it looks very much as if the thinker of eternal recurrence was also the thinker of radical kitsch. Hey, Retheus, it's going okay. This is we're reading a paper on Nietzsche. We think this is I think this is a bad take, and some of the people in chat also do. They're making Nietzsche way too Christian, basically like a Christian Stoic style. And it just seems maybe like this person has a textual point, but it just doesn't seem to fit Nietzsche's general zeitgeist. It would kind of knock Nietzsche down a peg if this author is right, but chances are this author is just not correct. So, but yeah, how you doing? The Christian, remember, can view every present as maximally weighty with redemptive potential. The thinker of eternal recurrence, Nietzsche appears to hope, can, in a supreme moment of affirmation, bring the whole of the past and the whole of the future within the ambit of his will, and so accord the present a weight which, in its character as transient happening, it entirely lacks. Yeah, so another thing. Oh, Buddha in general, yeah. So this person basically detemporalized all of existence, made it all infinitely recurring, all at once, basically. So you have all the past and all the future all at once, and then you get to make a decision right now. So this is giving this sort of the whole universe meaning in your one decision. But like they had to fix the entire universe, and so you're basically having to be okay in a fixed universe, which again seems very psychological, very deterministic, and very stoic, and just an apologetics to Christianity, which they're saying right here. So I just don't think that this was Nietzsche's world. They say basically that the eternal recurrence is supposed to be eternally recurring. That's fair, but I think there's better ways to interpret that. I'd go with Heidegger's. I'll mention what Heidegger says. I believe Heidegger says on this topic at the end. At such a moment, at such a present, the will is in effect to become omnipotent. It is in effect to break time and time's desire. Or to put it another way, the will is suddenly to find itself capable of transcending the whole sphere of becoming and transitoriness, of stepping outside time, of the conditions. Hey, Prof, what's going on? Thank you for the subscription. How you doing? Let's give Prof a shout out.
Hey, look at me.
I'm looking, dude. So yeah, the TTS is working. Also, Prof had some good news. He had a paper accepted for publication in a really good venue. I don't know if he can just, you can go over to check out his stream if you want to talk to him about it. But like, it's really good for him and like, getting stuff published. So everyone congratulate Prof on having a really nice publication forthcoming now. So yeah. So it's, it's good. It's professionally good, all that stuff. Yeah. So we're just talking about Nietzsche here. A bad take on Nietzsche, we think. But yeah. See, this is the thing. You're breaking time and time's desire by fixing the entire universe in an eternal, infinite recurrence. And so then you fixed it because it's just eternal and infinite. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the will is in effect to become omnipotent because it affects everything everywhere because it always recurs infinitely amount of times. And so the now actually gets universalized over infinite time and space. Yeah. So the will, is suddenly to find itself capable of transcending the whole sphere of becoming and transitoriness. So yeah, with infinite time, you've overcome transitions because you've got one block of infinite time. Of stepping outside time, of the conditions of contingency and embodiment, of reestablishing a harmony between truth and human well-being. In his efforts to retrieve something of the Christian's relation to time, then Nietzsche seeks, as the Christian seeks, to transcendentalize the present. And in seeking to transcendentalize the present, he is as false as he well could be to his own tragic wisdom. He finds himself in a very blatant way denying the real character of the fate which, under the sign of amor fati, he is committed to loving, to saying yes to. The thought then, or rather the fantasy of eternal recurrence, really is just kitsch, pure and simple. So, yeah, again, it's like, he's become what he hates. Maybe that's his fate, like Nietzsche becomes what he hates, and he failed in his ultimate goal. But, I mean, I always thought he failed too. But, like, this just seems like failing in a cheap way. And I don't think Nietzsche fails in a cheap way. He's not a cheap philosopher. He's not a kitsch philosopher. Yeah, so, Prof has got himself in a Rutledge Metaphysics Roundup, a compilation. So he's going to be among, like, big names in this metaphysics, like in contemporary metaphysics. So that's why it's like really good, because it's going to be in, like, he's going to be with everyone else like in the topic that has something big to say nowadays. So that's one of the it's real nice. Okay, Nietzsche's greatest weight is not the thought suggested by the demon. It is not the prospect that this life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, but is rather the prospect that the demon might not steal after him after all. What Nietzsche craves is something decisive, a test which, if one can but pass it, will somehow reintroduce the kind of transcendental consolation, the ultimate confirmation and seal, something that Nietzsche has no business to be offering, that the death of God has taken away, and which will, as a result, make the burden of having to love fate a little more bearable. But the real test, if one takes seriously what is best and deepest in Nietzsche's thought, is to love fate without having to cook up things like eternal recurrence or indeed any further test at all. Eternal recurrence represents a failure of nerve on Nietzsche's part, but then it is doubtful whether anyone ever has managed to bear the full glare of Nietzsche's tragic wisdom and still love fate in its light. So if Nietzsche himself couldn't bring it off, we shouldn't perhaps be too surprised. The need to do so was, in fact, his greatest weight, and his failure to bear it is signaled in the philosophical and moral embarrassment that is the thought of the eternal recurrence. We back. Okay, I'm sorry if I lost you. It looks like I'm okay at the moment. It says I'm okay. Sorry about that. Okay, if I missed anything. Okay, basically, if you missed this, this paper just finished up by calling Nietzsche a bitch. It's like he couldn't pull it off, and he's just failed. Where did it say it? So if Nietzsche himself couldn't bring it off, we shouldn't be too surprised. Yeah. Where was that? Blah, blah, blah. The TLDR. Okay. So, the TLDR is that Nietzsche failed in his own, thing. His failure to bear that is the idea that he was really just going for a Christian style meaning, is signaled in the philosophical and moral embarrassment that is the thought of the eternal recurrence. This paper says the eternal recurrence is trying to retrieve Christian style meaning, and the fact that Nietzsche did that shows that Nietzsche failed, like, tremendously. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is reintroducing some objective standard, and it actually happens to be a Christian-like standard. Yeah, so this is the thing. It's hard to call Nietzsche out and be like, this was his grand failure, and I saw it, and I am seeing beyond Nietzsche because I saw how Nietzsche failed. Yeah, well, that's true, Ivan. Maybe Nietzsche was like, you're faded if you write enough to write things that are not going to work well together and say something stupid. That's fail. Fine. Yeah. So, this is a very Christian interpretation. It seems like, this is just claiming that Nietzsche was doing a Christian thing. So, basically, in the end, all it says is that if you take Nietzsche at his very word, like, at the most literal reading, that everything is exactly fixed, that basically it's happening infinitely many times, that you can take this as an infinite block of unmoving time, and then in understanding that you have an infinite block of unmoving time, then you have choice in the moment of giving meaning at every single point. Yeah, this is very meh. I agree, Tindarius. So, but then you get to, like, then in doing this sort of, I'm losing my voice. Yeah, Arethius. That's kind of what happens here. It looks like this person is using a version of, doing, like, is making a claim on the time, Nietzsche's use of time, and, like, the infinity of time, to, like, look at it as a block and then say, okay, this is just recapitulating the Christian's ability to have infinite time on their side that has meaning, because now you are the one that's living through infinite time and you can give it meaning at every moment. And it seems a little bit like a weak interpretation, or not weak, an uncharitable interpretation here. So, like, where is this thing? They were saying they said very clearly that they were going to be an extremely literal reader, but I think it's a very selective literal reader. They were prioritizing this very hard sense of that the eternal recurrence was going to be exactly repeated, and that the demon was going to be redoing this over and over and over again, and you won't know it. So let's see, where is that? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's right here. See, this is the thing. If my life is to be repeated infinitely in all its detail, then those details include my ignorance of the fact that life is being repeated infinitely. That's fair. Like, of course. But you're supposed to at least be able to imagine, like, there's a question about your imagination. It's not a question about that you are doing this. It's the question about that you, given this knowledge, what will you do now? And I said that, and like, I made the choice. I said this, is that it's moving forward once you have this knowledge that you are changed. Will you live differently? And this author does not talk about that. It's like they're just saying, okay, given that this sort of view on a fixed universe, can we recreate it? And I don't like it. And it's, as Aris is saying, a type of literariness that doesn't take the message seriously. Yeah, I think they're taking it sort of, they just stopped at a point and were saying, well, we're just going to take them here and then not understand that, like, different things can come out of that. We should get a review going. So as always, if you're in chat, feel free. Did I, Ancient Ideas, yeah. So as always, feel free to, pick a review paper. I can't read a third paper at the moment. Tindarius, not happening. Yeah, already some real Nietzsche said for next time, all right? But anyone in chat, please, if you would, I'd appreciate it. Use some of the Better TTV emotes. If you think this was a fun paper, give it a fun brain dance. If you think this had big claims that shriveled up, then you give it the grapes. If it's for navel gazing, only for academics, nog navel. For deep ancient ideas, nog oro. Like, yeah, this is talking about like the eternal recurrence and meaning in life. Maybe you think this is like deep ideas. I don't know. Existential artistic drama, nog scream, and the turd is like if it's all style no substance, that happens, and nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments, good old analytic stuff. Yeah, sorry, you got to get the spelling exactly correctly, Rethius. Small b, big D on brain dance, but I'll fix it if you don't do it. I'll get it right. So I was also want to mention the Heideggerian interpretation. Heidegger also has this sort of like infinite history and infinite future, agrees on like this infinity sort of thing. So you're gonna give it a yay and a brain dance, but also so this is a very sort of this could be a very what's it called, polarizing thing. The Heideggerian interpretation says that look, you've got the infinite future and you've got the infinite past. He says you can't parse it though. That's the trouble. That if you have this infinite future and infinite past, and like the past, there's infinite many things that like led up to this point in your life, you can't have access to that. And if they're happening over and over or whatever, it's like an infinite mess. And same with the future. The future is completely open. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. There are so many possibilities. That's what gives the now actual meaning, because it's actually opaque, your entire past, and your future is completely opaque. Too many things are going on in the future. Too many things are happening in the past. So you do have meaning in the now because you actually can make a decision in the now given whatever your state of existence is now. So that means that you do have meaning in that whatever sort of being you are now, you get to, express that in the now. That is completely different from what this author says. This author is trying to give meaning by quantifying over all of time. Heidegger's saying, no, look, that's ridiculous. You're not quantifying over all of time. You're looking at the things from your first-person perspective now, and given the opacity of the past and given the openness of the future, then you actually get to make a choice, because whatever happens, it's like you're the butterfly. You're going to like change all of history from there thenceforth into like the great destiny of whatever Heidegger thought this was. You would have. And so that at least gives meaning, because that is all that has meaning, because you can't actually parse the like infinite future or the opaque past. All right, so what am I going to say? So that's an alternate take on Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, because that's you, and you have that choice at every moment. Every moment is like, well, who knows what the fucking past was, and who knows what the fucking future is going to be, but you always have the choice to like make a decision on what sort of thing you are now. So we're going to get a vote nay on this, because I'm insulted by this guy just being like, Nietzsche's wrong and I'm smart. That annoys me. Every time someone does this, like, this actually is part of my problem. I was in a college, and the golden boy in my grade, he was saying, oh, St. Aquinas fucked this up because of this technical thing. And I was like, that's a uncharitable reading, and like, there's a smart way to read it if like you read it this way. And he was saying something kind of interesting and smart, and the teacher completely sided with golden boy. And I was like, you're trivializing St. Aquinas. Why would you trivialize St. Aquinas? That's dumb. Why don't you like read him charitably like I'm saying? And the guy was like, no, he's clearly wrong if you interpret him that way. I'm like, yeah. Why do you think that's a good idea? That's the right way to interpret him. I'm like, it's stupid. And then we got nog grapes on this, because this made claims, and I thought it just, actually, no, did they shrivel up? Yeah, this made claims that, pulled back, basically. It wasn't all style, no substance. It was still poop underneath, but, it's a lot of shit. So, yeah, it was just a misinterpretation, so it's gonna get one of those, not a turd also. So yeah. So that was that. It's unfortunate. It wasn't like a really poorly written or explained paper. I just thought that their philosophizing was weak. This was weak philosophy. They stopped interpreting at a certain point. Ivan says, but we must say exactly how and why past philosophers got the wrong answers. We should not be in the business of avoiding say that past philosophers got it wrong. No, of course not. But again, what are you bothering with? If they fuck something up, like, Aristotle was like a misogynist, like we can call him out on that. But if you're saying something like on an interesting point in ethics, like, what do you care if there's an interpretation that's stupid versus an interpretation that's textual and interesting? It's like, are you going to give them the just say they were saying something stupid, or are they saying something interesting? You can say both, like you can mention both, but like it's not worth anyone's time to just be like, oh, if you interpret him using these modern techniques and he's just wrong, it's like, okay, why don't you interpret him in a charitable way? And so you could also say, if he said that, that's wrong, but it's like, then you have gotten nothing out of the philosophy. Nothing. It's like, that's what this person did. They stopped interpreting at a certain point and then just said, look, he failed. It's like, all right, yeah. If you stop part way through it, he failed. And I think that's a failure of this person's philosophy, that they couldn't interpret it differently. Their philosophical insight ended at a certain point. They got to a spot and they couldn't go any further. Ivan Neal says Aquinas makes an essentialist assumption about universals, without which his entire system collapses. That's fine. It's like, yeah. I was making a small point. I'm not saying, of course, Aquinas makes sense in like some grand scheme. It's just that if you're interpreting a passage and you're trying to do it, it's called the principle of charity. Do not be giving them the dumbest possible thing to be saying. And just don't. It's not useful. Ara says, yeah, he clearly knew Nietzsche's work and he wanted to argue for a provocative conclusion. Yeah, he did that. Nietzsche is secretly Christian, but you only get that conclusion if you read metaphors literally and ignore the spirit of things. Yeah, and that's why this is a failure of philosophical ability here. This is not a failure of scholarship or argumentation. We all thought I thought it was very clear. The writing wasn't poor. Like, I thought they had nice quotes and they did it well. I stumbled over some of the language. That's fine. That's on me, but a little bit on, people don't write these papers to be read out loud. But like, I think they stopped their interpretation in a certain area at a certain time. And I've said it again, all you have to do is, if someone were to tell you this, then you will change your mind. It will change your mind at that point. Like if a demon told you this. And so that will affect your life. And so it's not like everything was static. Things do change over time. Yeah, I mean, Unreal Brian, philosophers generally want to make sense. So Ivan's not wrong that you want to make sense. But like, again, your whole system may collapse eventually. That doesn't make you wrong in individual points. Like, you can say smart things sometimes and be wrong other times. It's like, yeah. Because that's how you make progress. Engineers do it that way. Yeah, atheists. It's like, that's the thing. This is persons ignoring all progress. Ara says, but it does make me wonder how Nietzsche is different than a Stoic. The biggest difference is probably that Stoics did think that some objective reality existed and logic could help you gain knowledge, which leads to virtue. Nietzsche argues for resilience, but not based on some noumenal realm. Yeah, see, I also agree that Nietzsche fails in the end. I don't think he's successful. I think he gets himself too tied up in language and sort of like the way he's describing the world. And so he can't really transcend his descriptions of things. He sort of lays out his program and says, look, I want, like, you've got, like, say the eternal recurrence. And then you've got like, okay, how do I actually get out of this or make it have value? You could go the Heideggerian route. You could go the route this person says. I don't know if Nietzsche actually got out of it, but the idea that Nietzsche actually was recapitulating Christianity just seems like that wouldn't be his thing. And so it's like, no, Nietzsche would need a way that, would you do this enough over and over again? Would you live your life in such a way? Well, no, I think Nietzsche would say, no, the whole point is to, as people in chat were saying, and Tindera was saying, that you were supposed to be like, uplifted as a guide. Like, this is a guidance. This author started off with the eternal recurrence as a test. It's not a test, it's a guide thought in some sense. Yeah, maybe you could test your life this way, but I think that's the wrong interpretation. It's more of advice than a test. And so it's like they've already, in the first thought here, as a test of some kind. I know you can't see this, but that was like literally the first, their introductory calls it's a test of some kind. And I think right there, it's not a test of some kind. It is, in some sense, could be viewed as a test, but it's more advice than test. Ridley wrote this when he was 35, relatively young in academic terms, and it looks like he had a Nietzsche book under his belt. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. You know, you can, like, in academic terms, you wrote a book. It, like, who knows what your book's on? It could be on one area, like you got really good into one area, and then you know, got into a different area, like didn't talk about the eternal recurrence, then you do talk about the eternal recurrence, and then I think misinterpreted it. That's fine. These things happen. But like, I think from the get-go, if everyone's got their review, and I don't know if I have anything else to say, but like the fact that they immediately, like right here, it is clear that the thought of eternal recurrence is proposed as a test of some kind. Like, is it? Maybe this right here, this initial thing that they said is just straight up a misinterpretation. It is not a test. It is advice. And that's not the same thing. Like, if I advise you to do something and you fail, then you failed like a test. But but advice is not a test. It is giving you general advice. And so, yeah. Your book is a 6-part sci-fi. Oh, cool. Yeah, he clearly knows his shit. Like, he knows his Nietzsche. I just think his philosophy in this one instance, like right here, I think this failed. I think this interpretation at the get-go, this is the beginning of the paper, like right there. There's his name, and this is like where his initial interpretation is misguided. And he misread this passage. Like, that's it. So he knows his shit, but like his philosophy was weak in this one instance. And that happens to all of us. We are not all like, even if we are great philosophers, we are not great philosophers all the time. So it's like, you know, Einstein said, you know, he fucked things up sometimes. He did not like his cosmological constant. He said that was the greatest mistake of my career. So it's like Einstein makes mistakes. Everyone has better days than others. And I think right here, this beginning interpretation of it, calling the eternal recurrence a test, because it was presented as a test, that's mistaking the description of the thing that's happening in the story as the way it is, as opposed to taking it as a moral, which I think Nietzsche was writing stories to be taken as morals. Like, you know, one of those things. That is correct, Rhetheus. So, I think that this is the failure here. Anywho, parables. Yeah, I'm losing words. Like, once I get past like 2 hours, especially past 2, and God forbid I go over 3 hours, I start dropping words and lots of stuff.